Okay, I want to thank everyone for your patience. We had a few technical glitches here to start off, so we'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to start by saying this meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. So we'll move on to number 3 is additions, deletions to the agenda. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Councillor Halverson.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. At the last meeting, I requested a discussion in committee of the whole to discuss the renaming of Queen Cornwallis. That was supposed to be, per our policy, a request through CAO and mayor. It's not supposed to be a notice of motion. So I'd just like to have that struck just for clarity and save us some time at the end of the agenda here.
Okay, so everybody's fine with removing that from the agenda? Okay. Okay, after 13.1 removed from the agenda, anything else? If not, a motion to approve the agenda is in order. Motion by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Mosier. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes. Recommendation that council approve the July 16th, 2024 meeting minutes as presented. By Councillor Bertle, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. So we're going to move on to item 6, which is actually a staff presentation by interim CAO Hillary Grant for the 2024 electric utility operating and capital budgets. So Hillary.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Before you is a proposed operating and capital budget for the electric utility. I'm presenting this budget this evening on behalf of our finance department and the utility, and of course would like to thank staff for all their hard work on these documents. The electric utility is restricted from borrowing for operational costs and may only borrow for capital expenditures. The operations and maintenance of the town's electric utility infrastructure are handled under a contract with Nova Scotia Power that originally dates to 2018. The newest contract, which runs from June 1st, 2024 to May 31st, 2025, includes a Nova Scotia CPI increase and an additional Nova Scotia Power staff member to administer our contract. This is accounted for in the budget. Salaries for all corporate services administration and finance staff are shared with other departments based on actual time spent working. These allocations are reviewed annually to ensure their continued relevance and accuracy. The budget for engineering consulting fees is for operational support. If additional specialized support is needed for specific capital projects, these costs are included in the line item for the capital budget. Electric utilities must ensure a reliable and continuous supply of electricity to their customers. This includes maintaining the infrastructure necessary for the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. Staff are recommending a sizable investment, approximately $1.9 million, for upgrades to feeder 81W223. Staff feel this is a strategic investment for several reasons, namely because it meets the utility's core responsibilities to maintain infrastructure and because it positions the utility to accommodate projected growth. First, while servicing costs are largely handed on to developers, this upgrade will allow us to meet upcoming servicing requests, including the new Harborview Haven project. It will not cover the full cost of service extension. Service extension costs are largely, again, borne by developers, but it will at least make extension possible. Next, the system is currently overloaded. Not only is accommodating growth impossible, it's important that we secure reliable service for the customers currently on the line. Upgrading 81W223 and changing to 3-phase benefits the entire system, making it more weather resistant, protecting it against, for example, rolling power outages in the winter months. The proposed work will also likely increase the value of the utility, such that it is a good investment, regardless of whether this or a future council would like to keep or explore potentially selling the utility. We are currently uncertain how this investment might impact future rate increases. Borrowing is the proposed immediate approach for funding the proposed capital work. Unlike the town's general fund, which is prohibited from budgeting for a deficit, the utility can carry a deficit. Any actual deficit at the end of a fiscal year is offset by previous retained earnings. This budget does have a projected deficit of $511,400,000. However, as of March 31st, 2022, the electric utility had kept earnings of about $470,000. This leaves a difference of approximately $41,000. This does not change the fact that borrowings must be repaid and the associated debt and interest payments need to be incorporated into the rate structure. While it seems a rate increase is necessary, it is unlikely to take effect before April 1st, 2025, due to the required Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board process that must be completed before any rate change is approved. The cost would be amortized over 3 years. We are aiming to present information regarding a proposed rate increase in September. Staff have provided a draft motion to approve under our recommendations, but council can, of course, defer a decision if they would like more time to consider the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. So as you can see on the agenda, that's the presentation. We will get to this part of the budget and that later on in 12.1. So that's just for presentation purposes at this point. And I guess it's before number 7. So if people want to speak on that under the next session, they certainly can. So we'll move on to number 7, which is public input questions. Just to go over the rules, each person is limited to 3 minutes. Each person must state their name. Questions or comments are directed through the chair, and comments or questions are limited to items on today's agenda only. So again, those are the rules. So we do have 3 people that have signed up. And once these 3 people have spoken, I will ask people from the floor, because some people came in a bit late in that, just in case somebody wants to speak. So. This is for the budget. We have 2. Okay, so this one then is for the public. There's only 1 signed up for this part. So that's Allison. Allison, so we normally don't have 2 public presentation sign-up sheets, so.
Good evening, council. I haven't heard of any birthdays lately, and so I'm just kind of putting it out there that if you have a birthday, let me know and I'll make an announcement. But on the serious side of things, somewhere on the minutes, it must say something about Tannery Road. Because I wanted to just say how wonderful it is and how appreciative I am at seeing it after, you know, everything we went through. And Tyson, all of the work you did to make it happen. It's really wonderful to see people using it. But I know Civic Square Design project is on the agenda, and I just wanted to say, from my opinion, let's leave it to the new council to tackle that one. And of course, because Civic Square has a bandstand in the middle of it, it's that recurring question for me. I want to know what's up and is there any news?
Thank you. And basically, first of all, I just want to thank staff. I think I've thanked you before, but thanks staff and Councilor Moser's relentlessness on getting Tannery Road sidewalk put in, because it is a great improvement to that area of town. I mean, I've heard nothing but positives when you go over there. It's a long overdue. So again, thank you to staff and everybody. And as for the bandstand, we're dealing with some things on that later on tonight. But my hope is and always has been that we can get some things in place, that we can get an RFP out, get work done in the spring and have it ready for next year's spring bandstand concert series. That is the plan, because it's not a 5-minute fix, unfortunately. So thank you. So next on the budget, or is there anyone else that would like to speak first of all on that part? Okay, thank you very much. Now, next on the agenda is the budget input and questions on the electric utility operating and capital budget. There are 3 people signed up to speak. So first on the list is Paul Rennie.
Mayor Myra, councillors, am I supposed to speak to the budget at this, or is just anything on the agenda?
This is actually the budget part, but if you want to speak on something on the agenda, that was the last part, but you can go.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
3 minutes.
Okay. I
That's what I was explaining. It was,
Yeah.
we had 2 sign-up sheets up there, so I think some people might have signed up on the wrong
Okay,
one.
I was confused.
Yeah, no worries.
Good evening, Mayor Myra and councillors. My name is Paula Rennie. I live at 211 Cumberland Street. I have a question about agenda item 12.5, the hiring of a new heritage officer. I didn't see a job description posted with a ad for a position. So I'm wondering, does the position require that the incumbent be familiar with and follow UNESCO World Heritage Site operational guidelines? And do they have responsibility to maintain the World Heritage Site Management Plan, or in our case, to develop and then maintain a World Heritage Site Management Plan, which is a role that does fall to the local World Heritage Site Manager? If so, when can we expect that management plan to finally be developed? It's about 30 years late. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see here you want a response from staff. So that's the appropriate way to respond to that, because that is a staffing question. We only have direct communication really with the CAO. So I'll leave that response to the CAO to get back to you in the future. Thank you. Next is Jesse Ward.
Hi, good evening, Council. I have some questions about the presented electric utility capital and operating budgets tonight. One thing that I wanted to see on the agenda with this budget was more information about the actual status of the electric utility, which the CAO has just started to touch on. What is the actual capacity for the utility as it is right now? What are the projected changes that we need to make overall over the next several years to meet the demand that we have right now for developments that are in progress or forecasted, and in a more long-term way? I know that it's been more than 2 years ago that we started to commission research for what would the future of the electric utility be. We're in the rare position of actually owning our own electric utility, and we commissioned at a $65,000 plus HST, SEMA Plus, the engineering firm, to review the future of the electric utility last April. We saw the options they presented, and they had some brilliant detailed recommendations on the different paths we could pursue towards either privatization of the electric utility, either keeping it ourselves and keeping the current NS Power contract we have, or possibly taking on our own staff, purchasing more equipment, managing everything in-house, or even possibly exploring shared services with other municipalities. And what they presented was that we are facing an imminent decision on $15 million of required investments to keep the electric utility viable. And that was last April, and we haven't heard any single update on that since. I understand that this is an incredibly complex issue. It requires a lot of research, a lot of staff time, probably more consultants. But there were some really great recommendations from the engineers that presented that report that I'd love to hear updates on. What have we done to explore possible federal, provincial funding opportunities? What have we done to explore shared services with other municipalities? Getting an update on that, I feel like it's one of the most critical things for us right now, because the electric utility is it's a absolutely critical piece of infrastructure that we all depend on. In terms of what is presented in the agenda, I would like to know more about the 1.8 million capital investment that Council is expected to vote on, about the extension to service projects on Knickle Road. I was glad to get more information tonight on what those specific projects are, that it's Harborview Haven and then other possible customers. But if it is going to be the ratepayer who's going to bear that cost, and that's going to result in an anticipated rate increase, then I definitely have some questions. I'd like to know, how have we decided specifically the ratepayers should bear the cost of the service extension cost for Harborview Haven and the other customers in the Knickle Road area? And why is that analysis not present in the agenda tonight if there is a report that describes how we've come to that conclusion? And where it mentions a rate increase, do we have any kind of approximate increase in mind for our electric rate? How significant would this be? This isn't to be provocative or anything, but it's just, is that a really small increase, or is it dramatic? What would that be for people? If we can anticipate that there is one, what information do we know about any potential increase? And I would also want to know why have we not been able to gather any more information on the anticipated rate increase prior to today's urgent vote to commit to this major capital investment? Thank you.
Thank you. I see you have no for staff response, but do you want a staff response? Because that's how you're going to get all the questions you just ask.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Because I was hoping you weren't hoping that I was going to answer all those right now. So thank you. Next on the agenda is Andrew Himmelman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Andrew Himmelman. I'm a local small business owner that works in the power utility business. I have a little background. I've got 18 years in the industry. I started in 2006 with Nova Scotia Power, Town of Mahone Bay, Yukon Energy, SNC Lavalin Transmission Distribution, Rockstead Power, Nalcor Energy, GSD Services, and PEI TNT Line Construction. And I've operated my own consulting turned into repair and maintenance company since 2015. I've worked on projects including a transmission changeout program here with the old Lunenburg utility team, right up to multi-billion-dollar federally and provincially funded projects. Currently got contracts for vegetation management with the town of Bridgewater and town of Mahone Bay. We have 4 utility trucks and lots of supporting equipment and tested tooling. I've sent 2 emails to Mayor Myra, first on January 17th and the second March 22nd of this current year, that have been unreplied. I have a few questions for transparency of the ratepayers, and for that, the general public should know. Does the public know that the utility generates approximately 1.3 million per year? In my opinion, this revenue helps keep the town afloat and operating, and amounts of about 10% of the annual budget. When I looked at the 2023 budget, there's 269,500 worth of town employee labor, with another 68,300 in benefits. Utility labor costs, which would directly feed into a contractor and into the agreement with Nova Scotia Power, was budgeted at 269,200. So town salaries was actually almost 70,000 more than who was physically looking after day-to-day operations with the town. On top of all the salary digestion here, does the public know that 49,300 of council honorariums, aka payroll, comes directly from the utility budget, from what I can tell? Why was only 25% of the utilities vegetation management spent in 2023? They budget 100,000 and less than 25,000 was performed. Are the lines trimmed back to some sort of standard? Are there no outages with the trees now because of you're not spending the budget? So the main question is, is Lunenburg planning on selling this utility to Nova Scotia Power? What options have you as interim mayor taken to prevent the sale, and or what communications have you had with Nova Scotia Power on the option of purchasing? This is something that public should be aware of. If the town did sell, what would the new tax rate look like when the town uses 1.3 million in to keep the town afloat? If the utility needs 15 to 20 million in repairs to generate 1.3 million per year, that equates to a 12 to 15 year payback, with the life expectancy of plant being 50 to 75 years. Are the residents prepared to just toss away 40 to 50 million in actual tax revenue? Why would the town ever even think about selling the utility? Thank you for your time, Mayor and Council. You have some serious issues to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. First, on the emails that you sent me, I forwarded those to staff at the time. I usually don't answer emails that I have no idea what I'm talking about a lot of times, and the electric utility is very complex. I do agree this is an issue that has very serious consequences. I happen to be a councillor when we had our own utility, and very proud of the way the utility operated for 12 years. I might have been here when you did some work for the town years ago. So again, I do like that option, but I don't know if that's realistic. Who knows? I think moving forward, we're going to have like a serious conversation between the new council, probably have some committee meetings, some public meetings, and people like you, to be quite honest, that are out there in the public that want to lend your expertise at those meetings, I think would be great, would be great at that time. Because I honestly think what happened in this council, the report got presented April of 2023. And then we've had multiple mayors, multiple CAOs, some councilors leaving. And there's been a lot going on. And to be quite frank, this is the first time that this council has really discussed the electric utility in a council forum since I've been elected. We haven't had it on an agenda because it is a complex issue, and we didn't want to make it an election issue, quite frankly, because I think it's some serious discussions have to be held, and it's a lot more complicated. More than most, but the general citizen would not know all the complications of the electric utility. So I thank you for bringing some of those things up. And if there is a committee in the future, we look forward to people of your expertise to maybe sit on that committee.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just, I watched the fall of the town of Canso, and I think keeping and retaining the utility here in Lunenburg is a must. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody. Anybody else have anything on the budget that didn't sign up that would have come in late or whatever? Okay, nothing. Then we'll move on to number 9, correspondence. There's some correspondence there. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up on any correspondence? If not, it's just there for information primarily. We'll move on to number 9.7, which is a noise bylaw exemption request, filming GEP Wires, Inc. There are 2 recommendations. There's no presentation. They're pretty straightforward. So the first recommendation is that council approve a noise bylaw exemption for August 15th, 2024, starting at 11 p.m. until 12 on August 16th to accommodate filming by GEP Wires, Inc., located at 94 Pelham Street. That's a recommendation. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Deputy Mayor. Is it seconded? Seconded by Councilor Mosier. Any discussion? Councilor Bertels.
Thank you. I'm just curious why it's 2 days away and we're just getting the request now.
Can you answer
that? Through the chair, we added it to, upon receiving the application, we added it to the very next council agenda. So we certainly tried to bring it before you as quickly as possible. And we routinely communicate to applicants that we would appreciate as much lead time as they're able to give us.
I appreciate that. Just because then the next one is the exact same thing. It's 2 days away and it's going into a 5 a.m. on a work day. So you're into an area where you have people working and there's going to be noise. So I think they have to be considerate of the location as well.
I don't disagree, but I think if we approve this tonight, I think we have to have staff or somebody go in that neighborhood ASAP, like tomorrow morning, and knock on some doors and let people know we're doing this, because not everybody watches us, unfortunately, or fortunately, on YouTube, and not everybody listens to the news. So I think that, asking or getting a staff person or 2 to go around those neighborhoods with a little notice will help. Because again, if you stuff it in the mailboxes tomorrow, not everybody also goes to the mail every day. So I think that's important. Oh, the company is doing it?
Yeah, so through the chair, under our film permit process, the folks who request the film, who request their film permit and a noise exemption, they are responsible for notifying residents that this is happening. And my understanding is that they have met those requirements as part of their film permit application.
Can we also make a social media post, do our due diligence as well, just because it is 2 days away?
Through the chair, absolutely. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody's information, so that there wasn't a sense that the public had not been notified at all.
No, I agree. I know we got a notice in mailboxes, I think, about this probably a week ago. I just think it's important because sometimes when companies are required to do this under permit, if we're not watching them closely, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not saying that's the case this time, but I just think to save ourselves some grief, we should really make sure it's happened, because This one isn't so bad. It's an hour from 11 to 12, but there's one there that does go for 6 hours till 5 a.m. So that might cause us some pain. So again, thank you. So there is a recommendation, moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed. Now for the second recommendation under this one, that council approve a noise bylaw exemption for August 16th, 2024, starting at 11 until 3 a.m. on August 17th to accommodate filming by GEP Liars Inc. located at the Blue Nose Wharf. Is there a mover? So moved by Councilor Mosher, seconded by Councilor Duggan. Any questions or concerns? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councilor Halverson.
Just to follow up with Council Bertels was saying, I think it would be helpful in the future too, just to, especially where it's an exterior. I noticed some of the one you're referring to about 5 a.m. That looks like it's an interior, so it's less a concern about noise. But when it's exterior in particular, I think it would be helpful if the filming crew could let us know what type of noise they expect to make. You know, what kind of an inconvenience. I don't know if they address that to staff and it just doesn't reach us, but that would be helpful.
I agree. Maybe staff can make a note of that and put it in one of our, in like a policy in the future, because I do know they're doing some filming on Broad Street tonight when I left to come here, and I stopped and asked them what they were doing, and it's in a house, but I mean, there's more gear than I've ever seen. There's trucks, cameras out on the street. So whether it's indoor, and this is indoors, so whether it's indoors or outdoors, people in that neighborhood at 3 a.m. are going to know they're there, I figure. So, So it's been a motion made. All in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Now, along the same lines, another noise bylaw exemption for 9.8, filming Ghosting Season 2. Recommendation that council approve a noise bylaw exemption for August 15th, 2024, starting at 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. on August 16th to accommodate filming by Ghosting Season 2 located indoors at the Lunenburg Academy. Someone moved by Councilor Halverson, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. And now for the second recommendation on noise bylaws. Council approve a noise bylaw exemption for August 16th, 2024, starting at 11 p.m. until 12 a.m. on August 17th to accommodate a filming by Ghosting Season 2. This time it's outside on the grounds at the Luneburg Academy. Is anyone prepared to make that motion? Moved by Councilor Bertle, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Lots of noise bylaws getting passed tonight. So there's no public hearings, public information, meeting and appeals. So we'll move on to business arising from unfinished business and the recommendation that council approve the new public statements policy as presented, repealing and replacing policy number 80, the commemorative flags and proclamations policy. And there's a presentation here by Kayla.
Yeah, thanks. So tonight we recommend that council approve the new public statements policy as presented, which would repeal, as you said, and replace the existing commemorative flags and proclamation policy. The existing policy is limited in scope, focusing primarily on flag raisings and proclamations without comprehensive guidelines for other forms of public statements. This new policy expands its scope to include letters of support in addition to those flag raising and proclamations. It also introduces clear parameters for what requests will be considered for public statements by council. Specifically, these requests must be made by a not-for-profit with a presence in Lunenburg or a citizen of the town, and that the cause must be of local, provincial, national, or international importance, benefit the community, or be an initiative of the town. These parameters are intended to ensure that the town's resources and platforms are used in a manner that benefit the community and align with its values. Council provided public notice regarding the potential approval of this policy at its July 16th meeting. Since that time, staff have not received any public feedback on the proposed policy. Since the policy was first presented, staff have reorganized it in accordance with the policy development and review policy, which is what you see in your agenda package tonight. The policy has now been divided into two separate documents, which is the policy document, which outlines the core principles and parameters and is approved by council, and then the accompanying administrative procedures, which contains the operational details, which will be approved by the CAO. As per that policy, the policy development policy, the administrative procedures outline the required timelines for submitting requests and the responsibilities of staff in conducting these activities. So really the operational things we need to put that policy in motion. Yeah, and with that, that's my report. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kayla. Any questions for Kayla? Okay, seeing no questions, is someone prepared to move that recommendation? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilor Bertles. Any further discussion, questions, concerns? Seeing none or hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Now we'll move on to new business 12.1, which is the electric utility operating and capital budgets. Recommendation 1, that council approve the 24 electric utility operating budget as presented for a total amount of $7,518,700. Before we make that motion, I'm sure there's going to be some questions or discussion. So does anyone, Deputy Mayor?
Just a point of clarification here. So we aren't approving this for 4 months. It says council approved the 2024/24 electric utility. So perhaps that is supposed to read 24/25.
Thank you. Any other questions on the operating budget? Councilor Moser.
Just with regarding this budget, so if per se, like we wouldn't pass this tonight, what would happen?
Through the chair, excellent question. There is time for council to consider if you would like to defer. But of course, a budget will need to be approved relatively soon in order for the electric utility to continue functioning. Because of course, staff can't operate the utility or spend money without council approval.
So then, just for clarity, it's not like the town budget that has kind of a sunset clause. I think like the end of August, that budget needs to be, approved, or we kind of basically cease operation.
Through the chair, I do believe that it would have an impact on the operations if it wasn't approved in a relatively timely manner, but I would need to refer back to finance to get an answer on what that specific date would be. I know that there is time to defer it to the next council meeting. I was sure to check that before coming this evening.
Okay, well, not that I want to wreck anything or turn anything upside down here tonight on that regard, but it is concerning when these budgets come out this late. It just it doesn't give council a good enough time to prepare to, and to offer options that may be available. I do, and I am patiently waiting, as Mr. Ward said, for that report for staff that came out. We had that consultant here a year and a half ago, and I know there's some staffing issues in finance, but this is a critical piece of infrastructure that that we depend on. And I think Mr. Himmelman said he didn't want us to go down the same hole that Canso is, but I think we have one leg well entrenched in that hole already. That I think we're beyond the point of being able to reclaim staff and equipment and resources to sustain that utility. Staffing wise, even from an administration point, we're losing experience all the time. And then again, I think whereas Kentvilles did sell their asset a few years ago, I think they got in in the terms of $7 million. And I think with some of the critical infrastructure that's facing us down the road, that might be money well received for the town of Lunenburg. That's really all I have to say about the budget. Otherwise, it's the budget. It is what it is.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Halverson.
Well, we're all concerned about the future of the utility. When you start throwing around tens of millions of dollars, makes us all nervous. I'm not quite ready. Well, unfortunately, it would have been nice to been able to dig more into this with this council. We're not going to have that opportunity. This is obviously going to be left to the next council. And I would hope that report will be forthcoming, and the next council will spend a good amount of time educating themselves and staff prepare them to make these kind of decisions. I'm not quite ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the expression goes, just yet. I do believe, as Mr. Himmel mentioned, there are other alternatives that could be used there are partnerships that can be found with other municipalities who are operating their own. There are other models, but at this point, like I said, we're not looking to run the utility into the ground. I do have concerns about the $1.8 million for Knickel Road, and I understand we're looking at we're preparing for the expansion for the home to go up the top of the hill. You did mention that it doesn't cover the cost of the entire expansion. So what I'd be looking to hear from staff at this point is to understand, what are we getting for that 1.8 million? How is it benefiting the rest of the residents of the town? And what approximately, again, I know you probably this has to go to tender, but I would like to have an idea of what the home will be responsible for in order to make those, final couple hundred meters connection.
Thank you. Before we go any further in this, I'd like to make a suggestion if I could. I don't think any of us are 100% prepared with this budget the way it's presented. It's presented late. There's some questions to be asked. We have a committee of the whole, which is new to this group lately, scheduled for August 27th, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Can we, is it 27th? Yeah, can we refer this discussion to August 27th so we can have more deep discussion? It's open to the public can attend and discuss this, since we've only gotten this from 4 days ago. Discuss it, come up with some options, and come back at the September 10th meeting with a budget that some of the questions we're asking today can be answered, or we could be sitting here all night if we all have the same, because I think most of us are going to have some questions. So these are the type of items personally that I think should be discussed at a committee of the whole meeting first and then brought here. So that's, I guess I'll ask staff if we could do that, if council is agreement.
Through the chair, certainly you could do that so long as council's in agreement.
Well, are we, the question I asked you is pretty straight ahead. I figure, are we prepared to answer that question tonight? It's included in the budget. So it's obviously there's been some accounting done. So I would like an answer to that question in particular, and then we can continue to get the conversation at the committee of the whole.
I'm fine. I'm just saying after that question, then rather than sitting here going around and around and around, because we're all going to, I think this would have been better presented in committee of the whole to start, and we could discuss some of these things and then bring it out of in a format like this. But that's just my suggestion again. So we can get staff to answer your question, and then we can move on if you'd like. But are you prepared to answer Councillor Halverson's question?
Through the chair, I'm no electrical engineer, but I'll certainly try my best. So again, I think part of the reason that staff, of course, I'm presenting on behalf of the finance department this evening, are bringing forward this capital investment in particular is a big end because it shores up what is already there. And again, accommodates these large scale projects that are coming. It's up to a developer to propose how they plan to incorporate into utility systems. Harborview Haven has not brought forward a proposal of how they plan to do that and how much investment they plan to make to join the utility and link into our power grid, our water, our sewer, as far as I am aware. However, of course, this upgrade is also important to ensuring that particular section of our utility physical section, that particular line, if you will, is maintained to an adequate standard where it is not at risk of getting overloaded through usual use, not at a risk of getting overloaded due to strains created by weather, etc. So it's a combination of some forward thinking and also some maintenance that is required to make sure that we're meeting our obligations to ensure that the utility continues functioning properly. Again, it is at maximum capacity. So that line could use with some investment to make it, dare I say, a little less precarious in terms of fluctuations in power use, solely even with the customers that are currently on it. Again, that's obviously a layperson's description. Darren Lamont with SEMA, who has been working on the electric utility with us, was invited to come this evening and sends his apologies. But certainly if council would be interested in discussing this further, staff would again invite him to come to the next meeting.
I'm not an electrical engineer by any stretch. I'm sure no one around the table. Tyson may have the best handle on it. Well, give you some credit, but I won't speak for you. But I would appreciate having someone here who can explain it in layman's terms. To say we're at maximum capacity is fine, but why? And I understand we've got a major industrial customer up there in Stelia. I don't know what HB Studios draw. I don't know what the grid is. I don't know if the retail outlets on Victoria, thank you, all the way up there are included, or the school. So I think we'd like a little more detail to know what we're investing in before we spend $1.8 million and saddle that on the residents. And granted, I understand it's not going to come out to the budget for about a year, but it's going to come out. And that's an increase. That's a legacy increase we're passing on, and a year and a half from now. And I'm not comfortable doing that unless we know what we're saddling the town with.
Maybe we could ask that gentleman to come to the committee of the whole meeting at the end of the month, number
Yeah, I
one.
appreciate that.
Councillor Duggan?
How is that section different from any other section in town? Do we have multiple sections that are over capacity? Do we have other areas that are going to need the same improvements in the future? Do we have an idea of what that will look like? And why this section in particular at this time? And I'm just curious to know if there are other areas that need the same care.
Through the chair, yes and yes. So if you review the history of investment in the electric utility, certainly the electric utility needs investment. I would argue across the network. There are many, many locations in town that could use attention within our electric grid. Again, certainly there's no shortage of places to invest, upgrade, maintain, to ensure that the utility continues to function. However, we do know that there is a major customer who will be requesting adding to our electrical grid in the near future. That has been consistently discussed around the council table as an important community asset. So when deciding where to invest in now, it seemed both a prudent investment to make, again, as regular business, to ensure that we're meeting our standards that are set by the Nova Scotia Utilities and Review Board, while also making a slightly strategic decision to ensure that we're well positioned to accommodate that request when it comes.
Thank you. Councillor Halverson?
Yeah, and I respect what you say there. And obviously we all want to have Harborview Haven remain in town. We've already discussed the virtues of that, and there's no debate. They're wonderful to be here. My concern is, it's a large investment. And they are an enterprise that has access to, or perhaps potentially could have access to, other forms of funding that maybe we couldn't get. If we're having to improve our electric utility in order to facilitate their move, as a requirement of them operating, does that not fall partially on the provincial government to come up with some funding to help support that move and help support them in that development, right? So these are things I want to explore before we commit to spending almost $2 million to see if, can we get some partnership money so that we're not on the hook for all of it. So, and I know that's not a question you can answer today. You're not going to have, they don't have an answer yet with Harborview Haven. But I think we need a more complete picture. To the mayor's point, I think moving things ahead, could we have someone provide us that overview, perhaps a general overview? I'll look to the rest of council here, but are we looking for a general overview of kind of the state of the utility, where it needs improvements at this point, where we are in capacity, and what we need in order to provide for Harborview Haven's move? I'll just look around the council. Is that what we're looking for from, if we had somebody come present?
I think that's what we're looking for the committee of the whole meeting in the month. For an example, and I'll just tell a deputy mayor story. He looks after the Christmas tree lighting here every year graciously, and he was told a couple of years ago that he can't get any more Christmas trees than we have on that hill because we're at our electrical capacity on that hill. So if we got, say, 20 more trees on that hill, you might cause some problems. So that tells you the condition of our electric utility. And I'm no electrical engineer, but I'd suggest that means it's not good over there, right? So that's just a layman's story, all right? So that sort of brought things into reality for me when I was told that. So let's move this to committee of the whole if you're all in agreement. Everybody good with that? We don't need to vote. We can just gentlemen's agreement over here, council agreement. You good? Everybody good? Okay. We're going to move this to committee of the whole. Committee of the whole will be advertised when it is. It's the 27th at 6 p.m. in this room. So you're more than welcome, everybody, to attend and sit and listen to the meeting. And but anyways, that's what we're going to do with this part of the agenda. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to 12.2. There's a recommendation there. There's actually two. But before we do any recommendation, I'll get Tyson to do his presentation. Tyson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council and Mayor Myra. I've got a report to present about the Montague Street retaining wall tender award. So there's two recommendations. The first is that Council increase the budget for the Montague Street retaining wall repairs project to $220,000 using the funding of $100,000 from long-term borrowing. That was included in the capital budget, and then an additional $120,000 from the surplus asset retirement reserve. And then the second recommendation is that Council award the Montague Street retaining wall tender to J. Mason Contracting Limited for the amount of $152,961 plus tax. So some background on this item. The project is intended to repair and replace a portion of a retaining wall that supports the sidewalk along Montague Street. The retaining wall in this area has significant disintegration, severe erosion of backfill material, and wide cracks along it. The very poor condition of the retaining wall poses a future risk to the sidewalk and its users, and the possibility of having to close the sidewalk from 44 Montague Street up to the public washrooms. So we're talking about the stretch on Montague just past where Linden ends to just up before Cornwallis Street. The retaining wall is a critical structure for the street right-of-way to maintain the significant elevation differential between Montague Street and Blue Nose Drive in this section of town. So this retaining wall sits at the back of the sidewalk. If you're walking down Montague Street and you're kind of looking over the fence, you can see that Blue Nose Drive is a lot lower. So the retaining wall helps to retain the road structure as it is. And there's a typo in the report. It refers to 44 Montague Street, but it's actually 36 Montague Street. So I apologize for that. The scope of this project falls into three distinct portions. One is cleaning out and sealing a horizontal crack in one section of the wall. The second is removing a section of the existing retaining wall structure and replacing it with a new cast in place steel reinforced retaining wall that's approximately 8.4 meters at the back of the footing. And then it would be the necessary road and sidewalk reinstatement work along Montague Street to allow for the construction and some additional sloping to make sure the water drains away from where the issue is occurring at the moment. So we've talked about the 24-25 town capital budget for Montague Street retaining wall carried $100,000, and this included the engineering and the civil work. So in order for the project to proceed, we require an additional $120,000, including the net HST, which can be sourced from an increased contribution from the surplus asset reinvestment reserve. And Public Works have worked with our colleagues at Finance to find the best place to find those additional funds. So in terms of the tender itself, The tender closed on July 23rd and is valid for 90 days. We received 2 submissions. So one was from J Mason Contracting Limited, who've recently performed the Townsend Street wall reinstatement behind Town Hall. And we're also responsible for the Duke Street extension reinstatement, getting the staircase back in working order there. So the sidewalk obviously is kind of in a key location for the town, important link for people coming from Newtown to connection to Old Town, Blue Nose Drive, tourists, connection to commercial, food and retail establishments, public washrooms, and the trail. So the deterioration of the wall is also impacting the adjoining landowner at 36 Montague, who has a garage adjacent to the section of the wall designated for replacement. And that's one of the things that made this deterioration really, really hard to understand, because the garage masks the deterioration. So I've attached a couple of photos in the report, and the second and third page are photographs that were taken of the condition of the wall within the garage. The framing you can see there is the framing of the garage, and then behind it is kind of looking underneath Montague Street, and you can see the condition there where materials come loose. And then in the street view, you can see where we have the sandbags, and the lip at the garage is protruding because the material below it has I think probably through freeze thaw and where water's penetrated has migrated the material out through the garage wall. So
Can I just stop Tyson for a second? Can we actually have these pictures up on the screen so everybody can see them? Just so everybody's aware of what's going on.
yeah, so that's one section of the wall there, and the upper section is somewhat intact, but the lower section you can see significant amount of materials no longer there supporting the wall. So the expectation would be that if it continues in this condition, more in sort of rain events or snow events, freeze thaw, the water's going to travel through the joints in the sidewalk and exit the easiest way it has, which at the moment fairly clearly seems to be that. You can kind of see the daylight coming through where the rocks are loose, and that's come. So so again, in terms of the financial aspects, $100,000 was included in the town capital budget. However, after incorporating the results of the civil work tendering, additional project requirements, and the engineering, the revised budget estimate has increased significantly to $220,000. There's a breakdown in the table of where those funding requirements have come from. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions, happy to do my best to answer them.
Any questions for Tyson? Councilor Moser.
Thank you, Worship. Through the chair, what's the impact on the privately owned building there? Like, I mean, what's the garage? What's, what impact is it going to have on that garage and the homeowner?
Through the chair, are you talking about the impact of the work that we were proposing?
Well, I'm saying obviously you're gonna have to dismantle some of that building. So on how much is the town liable on that and how much is the homeowner themselves or the property owner, have to chip in on that? Because obviously that's in front of the retaining wall. It looks like that infrastructure is in front of the retaining wall by the looks of the pictures.
The deteriorated section actually, our understanding is that is the original retaining wall. So the framing there is the structure of the garage. The proposed construction would happen on the street side, like on the property line of the town, and impact the sidewalk and the road, and it would be a footing that comes back into Montague, and then the wall would it provides a 6-inch gap between the framing on the garage and the vertical piece of the wall, and it would be an L-shaped wall, so it would run parallel to Montague, and then it would tuck around the corner, sort of on the side where the public washrooms are. So the intent is we'll need some cooperation from the property owner. They're certainly aware of the work because they brought the issue to our attention, and that was great. But the work is planned to be from within the right of way or the public washroom side generally, other than forming the inside of the wall.
Exactly. You're working the outside in rather than the inside out. Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess along the same lines, I guess that I think this has to be done. It's a very busy area, and I think we'll end up probably making this recommendation. I just hope we aren't back here in a month or two discussing building the guy a new garage, right? So that's what I'm, when you're that close, we got to make sure these guys do great work. They did great work here and they did great work down there. So I have full confidence, but I just hope that something doesn't go sideways when we end up having to replace the front part of that garage or something in the future. So I think that's the concern when you're that close.
I think that's valid concerns. Construction, you've always got to be cognizant of the impact that the work's happening on surrounding items. So very valid points.
Excellent. So there is a Councillor Halverson.
Just further to that, I mean, again, we don't really want to be buying someone a garage. We don't have to here. In your discussions and in the tender, I assume that this condition was outlined and whoever we decide to award this tender to is prepared to deal with that contingency to make sure that the building doesn't fall. Like that's in the plans. Yes.
So through the chair, the contractor that we're recommending was present at this on-site meeting during the tender period and had a chance to understand the uniqueness of the site. Let's say.
Great. Just want to make sure everyone's on the same page and there's no surprises. Okay, good.
Excellent. So there is a recommendation there that council increases the budget for the Montague Street retaining wall repairs project to $220,000, funded by $100,000 from long-term borrowing and $120,000 from surplus asset retirement reserve. Is there someone prepared to make that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Moser, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Councillor Halverson.
Just on that financing, is there no possibility of doing this without some borrowing? We can't pull it from another fund somewhere in town?
That would be a question for staff.
Through the chair. So the original $100,000 that was included in the capital budget was from the long-term borrowing or debt. So staff has recognized that that's pulling another 120 to make the 220 maybe isn't the best way. So finance director worked to find an alternative for the additional funds that were required.
Okay, so the 100,000 is already a budget for on borrowing. Okay, no, I appreciate clearing that up. Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried unanimous. Recommendation number 2, the council award the Montague Street retaining wall tender to J Mason Contracting Limited for the amount of $152,961 plus HST. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Counselor Halverson, seconded by Counselor Mosier. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried unanimous. So we'll now move on to 12.3 Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project. Staff looking for direction. So before we do anything, we're going to have a presentation from Hillary.
Thank you so much. Staff are seeking direction because on July 24th, we received a significant change order for $97,500 plus HST, a nearly 130% increase from the budgeted amount for the Civic Square Accessibility and Compatibility Project. The conceptual design phase of this project is complete, with council choosing option 3, working with the natural environment, as their preferred option. The next phase was Vigilant preparing tender documents and a Class C cost estimate for the design, which Vigilant has roughly estimated at costing $3,375,000. Staff's understanding is council launched this project so the town would be prepared for any major accessibility-related capital grants that the province or federal government may make available. However, there aren't any funding programs available at the moment that align well with the project's requirements and scopes. Also, an RFP to assess the bandstand, town hall, and the fire hall has been issued and closed, with staff hoping to bring forward a memo towards potentially awarding this contract next month. Of course, each of these major assets is located within what we refer to as the civic squares. I look forward to your direction clarifying whether this project is still a council priority, given this update. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So question, concerns, comments around the table. Councilor Mosier.
Well, once again, we're going to be held hostage to these consultants and really with no value attached to them, right? Even a Class C estimate is, well, not worth much, correct, Bison? As we have experienced here in the last, several tenders that we've, actually got the work, put out for. So I say we park this thing.
Councilor Halverson.
Yeah, well, look, I'm glad to see we have something so that if some funding does become available, we can say, okay, this is our plan roughly. And, we're not starting from zero, but I have to agree, I don't see spending that money at this time on this project makes any sense.
Anyone else? I'd just like to add that I 100% agree. I think I presented before I sat in this chair opposing this project in August, thinking that we were maybe doing something a bit too early. This was based on the 2030 accessibility rules and that, and I think they will change when government changes a couple times between now and 2030. I think with priority and provincial and federal spending now on housing and other areas, I think that the closer we get to that 2030 deadline, there will be all kinds of funding opportunities probably out there for this type of thing. But again, we do have something in place that we can at least present at the time. But I'd totally be opposed to spending way more than we originally spent for them to proceed. So I think it's time to basically shut her down, in my opinion. Guess we'd probably need a motion to. Okay. So someone prepared to make a motion because Councilor Halverson.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we do proceed with change order for the Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project. So we are not going to pursue it.
Yes, moved. We're not going to proceed.
However, that should be phrased. We move not to proceed with the Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project at this time.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a seconder? It's been seconded by just with everybody. Okay, Councilor Mosier. So any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Hillary. Now, next is the 12.4 Sustainability Cultural Tourism Plan and Cultural Economic Impact Study. Just like to say before we get the presentation from Mark, I happened to be in my office that afternoon when they met here, and I must say for a lot of there's multiple volunteers and others on that committee. They were here for 4 or 5 hours that afternoon. They were really dug into this very deep. So for a volunteer committee and a community committee, I thank the committee and the group for meeting, because it was definitely some stuff going on in here, because I could hear it out in the hallway. So thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Myra. And to introduce myself, and for the record, of course, I am Mark Kiley. I'm the Interim Director of Community Development. So I'd like to present 2 recommendations today with regard to the Cultural Tourism Economic Impact Study and Plan. And the two recommendations specifically are that Council award the firm 21 FSP Advisory Incorporated $59,918.63 plus tax to fulfill the Sustainable Cultural Tourism Plan RFP. And then also that Council award ASBB Economics and Research Limited $59,650 plus tax to fulfill the Cultural Tourism Economic Impact Study. So to provide some background information, in April 2024, the town issued 2 RFPs for a Sustainable Cultural Tourism Plan and Economic Impact Study. Those RFPs closed in early May. And there was strong interest with, we received 22 submissions, 13 for the Economic Impact Study, 9 for the Cultural Tourism Plan, and then 5 for joint submissions. So the expected deliverables for those will include a comprehensive resource mapping, economic research, experiential tourism development, marketing recommendations, community engagement, as well as the development of a community engagement plan and capacity building workshops. There will also be ongoing training, mentoring, and support provided to key stakeholders to ensure the plan's successful implementation. Anticipated outcomes will also include the development of a replicable economic impact methodology for future use by the town. In recent weeks, town staff have worked through a review and evaluation process related to those submissions. We utilized a grading rubric, standardized grading rubric based on expertise, experience, innovation, the strength of the proposal in the area of community engagement, the methodology, project timeline, and of course, value for money. And this was in line, consistent with the criteria that was presented in those RFPs. So from that process, we were able to shortlist the strongest, what staff felt were the strongest contenders down to 7, which was then referred to the Cultural Tourism Working Group, who then undertook their own review with that shortlist. And over the last month, the Cultural Tourism Working Group has kicked off and met twice. In that most recent meeting that Mayor Meyer was referring to, August 1st, the staff, those shortlisted proposals were discussed and deliberated, discussing the pros and cons, their strengths and weaknesses. And this is important, of course, because that working group is also going to act in a steering capacity with those with the companies that will be awarded those contracts. So the working group identified the strongest proposal as far as the Sustainable Cultural Tourism Plan contract, and that's for 21 FSP, as noted in the recommendation. They have a significant local regional experience in projects of similar scope within the tourism sector. They have a proven track record with ACOA funding partner and working within the framework of ACOA's Sustainable Tourism Expansion Program, which is otherwise known as the STEP program, which will be adhered to in that funding agreement. Their proposal also highlighted their flexibility and willingness to adjust to meet the requirements and deliverables, working with that steering committee. And 21 FSP applied to both RFPs, but they did note a strong willingness to work with another consultancy should council choose to award the economic impact study or the, depending on which one they were awarded, if they were awarded, strong willingness to work with that other consultancy. As far as the economic impact study, the strongest identified firm was the ASPB Economics and Research. They stood out for their robust local stakeholder knowledge and experience with regional projects of similar scope. They're currently working on the arts and culture strategy for the municipality of Chester. Their proposed methodology for community engagement and data collection includes direct from consumer data sets through planned surveys and interviews, and that was particularly strong noted amongst those amongst the proposals. The proposal and subsequent interview demonstrated a clear willingness to collaborate with the other consultant that would be hired for the Sustainable Cultural Tourism Plan. They did propose a significantly shorter timeline than expected as far as deliverables to 26 weeks, about 6 months. But the staff have confirmed that they're willing to be flexible on that timeline to adhere to be complementary to that the other process, ongoing process that will be going the same time simultaneously. So it should also be noted that I may have mentioned before that 21 FSP did submit for both RFPs, while ASPBB submitted only for the economic impact study. There are potential benefits of awarding both contracts to a single company, such as the increased efficiency and the cohesive deliverables. However, there's also risks, including a possible decline in the quality or focus of one of the projects. So the working group did discuss the pros and cons associated with that and ultimately decided to recommend who they felt were the strongest candidates for each individual RFP. As far as financial implications, council approved on April 9th using the $50,000 allocated to developing an economic impact study and analysis, as well as $137,000 received from the ACOA to develop a cultural tourism economic impact study and plan. So these proposals fit well within those budgetary requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions for Mark? Councillor Halverson.
Oh, thanks for the presentation. And again, thank you to the committee who did such good work and spent so much time invested and make sure we have this. That's a lot. 4 hours sitting in a room to try to figure this out is a lot. So thank you. When I go through the, what is it? Sorry, my glasses again. The economic impact study. I look at what it's evaluating. The study should evaluate various sectors, including events, tours, retail, hospitality, accommodations, and historic sites and museums. What I'm not seeing in here is an evaluation of UNESCO. Part of this, when this came forward, now I'll look to Councillor Motion to correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm pretty sure this is one of the things we were beating the drum on, is we want to find out, are we getting value for money with the UNESCO designation? Yes, it's been beneficial. I don't think we can argue that since its inception, but I think like anything, we have to review at regular intervals to find out, is it still of value for the town? I don't see how that's being assessed in here. And I know that was something that we had discussed earlier. So how is that captured, or has it not been captured?
Thank you. And through the chair. So as far as it being, itemized in the RFP proposal, it's not there. I do know that from discussions that it is, that's an identified need, there's an identified need there. I know that the consultant did propose as far as their economic research, that's going to certainly be included in their economic research as a huge part of the the cultural tourism sector in Lunenburg. But again, it is a bit of a working progress as far as the cultural tourism working group acting as a steering committee and ensuring that that component is going to be taken into consideration. There's an identified timeline. We have 1.5 to 2 years as far as horizon for this this working group, and working through those 2 projects with the consultants. So so I think there's lots of room there to work with them to include that in there. I think it would be I think it was noted it would be a huge risk to not consider the UNESCO designation when looking at that from an analytical standpoint.
I would really like to see that captured somewhere in writing, because we do hang our hat on that designation, and I do feel like I'm ambivalent about it, one way or the other, if it's good, bad, or different. But I would like to know. I'd like to get some numbers on that. I think, when we talk about the benefits that UNESCO bring forward, I would like to be able to quantize that. So if somebody comes to me in the street and says, "Why are we bothering with UNESCO?" I could say, "Well, because it generates X amount of dollars for tourism." So is that? I know we're just approving the economic impact study at this point, but I guess I look to the CAO with how do we ensure that that is captured going forward?
Through the chair, of course, Old Town Luneburg World Heritage Site is a heritage site. And so, of course, given that this project is studying the historic sites in town, I would be shocked if a consultant somehow overlooked our World Heritage status. Certainly, this is something that we could follow up on as staff through the contract negotiations as we dot all the I's and cross all the T's on the contract. If council would like to defer to have us look into that, I believe staff could see if the recommended proponents were willing to hold their bids. I can't remember off the top of my head when these bids expire, but in the past, successful proponents have been very open to leaving those bids open.
And again, to be clear, I'm not saying get rid of UNESCO. What I'm saying is we need to be able to show the value UNESCO brings. For instance, the building we're sitting in, we've been talking about the escalating costs of refurbishing this building. It's something the town would be almost impossible to try and do on our own when we're faced with every other economic challenge we have. But if we can point and say, we have this UNESCO designation that drives this much to the economy, we can take that, we can take it to, grant providing groups, different levels of government, and use that as leverage to try and provide more funding, right, to secure that heritage status. So I just really feel like we need to have that broken out so we know what argument we can make.
Anybody else? Okay, so there's 2. I do agree that I think that has to be clear in that document, because I think that's one of the big things we've discussed here the last 6 months. The question seems to be on the street: are we a tourism town? And really, what revenue does tourism bring? And does UNESCO bring anything to town? And for 30 years or 25 years, we've had no real answers. We can all say what we think personally, but until we get actual numbers in front of us, we don't really know. I know what my personal opinion is on the whole thing, but it's only my personal opinion because I have no serious data to back it up, right? But I do know that small stores in Lunenburg, and I'm not saying it's because of UNESCO, but do much better than small stores in a lot of other coastal towns that have suffered since the fishing industry has died, right? And I think UNESCO had a big impact on that starting out. I'm not sure if it's as big as it used to be, but it was huge in the mid-90s when we went to UNESCO. So we do need some numbers, and we do need some numbers because we get asked by different levels of government, like Councilor Halverson says, when we're applying for money, like, well, what does UNESCO really bring? And we don't really know a number, to be honest. So I agree. So if staff could make sure they get that put in there, that would be greatly appreciated. So saying that, there is two recommendations in front of us. Is someone prepared to move recommendation number one, that council award 21 FSP Advisory Inc. $59,918.63 plus HST to fulfill the Sustainability Cultural Tourism Plan RFP? Moved by Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Halverson. Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion carried unanimous. Recommendation number two, that council award ASBB Economics and Research Limited $59,650 plus HST to fulfill the Cultural Tourism Economic Impact Study. Is there a mover for that recommendation? So moved by Councilor Bertle, seconded by Councilor Halverson. Any other discussion on that? Councilor Halverson.
I just want to see how that, the points we're making about breaking out UNESCO and make sure we can get those numbers in. Should we include that in that recommendation, or can we, how do we do it?
Through the, thank you, sir. Through the chair, again, it seems that there is consensus, and again, within the scope of the RFP, since it does specifically say historic sites, it would be, again, very shocking to me if that somehow did not come into the analysis. Should council want to provide absolute clarity and have this on the record, which of course staff always appreciates, you could, for example, make a motion directing the working group to include this in their work. But again, staff doesn't feel that that's necessarily necessary.
I appreciate staff's diligence, but I would feel more comfortable including that in. So if we can include that direction to include an assessment of the value UNESCO brings to the town of Luneburg in that economic impact statement. I'll make the motion as with that inclusion, or amendment, however we do that.
Is that an easy addition, Kayla?
So sorry, Ed, I have in my record that you seconded that motion, or were you just raising your hand to bring up this point?
I was raising my hand.
There we go. So the motion hasn't been seconded, so we don't have to do that whole rigmarole of amending the motion. We can just go back, amend it, friendly amendment.
Okay.
So who wants to make the friendly amendment? Councilor Halverson made the friendly amendment.
Did we capture the friendly amendment?
To fulfill the cultural impact study, and that this contract include
An assessment of the economic impact of Old Town Luneburg World Heritage Site.
that's it.
Now, is that as the site, or as UNESCO as the designation? I think the UNESCO designation is what we're after, not the site itself.
Old Town Luneburg World Heritage Sites UNESCO listing.
Okay, so it's been moved. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councilor Bertles. Does it need to be read back? Are you all ready to vote? You're good? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried unanimous. So now we'll move on to 12.5, Heritage Officer Appointment. There's a recommendation that council appoint Laura Grizzly as a Heritage Officer for the Town of Luneburg per Section 19 of the Heritage Property Act. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor Myra. Again, Mark Kiley for the records, Interim Director of Community Development. I'm very happy to make this recommendation to council to appoint Laura LaGraley as a Heritage Officer for the Town of Luneburg for Section 19 of the Heritage Property Act. Section 19 of the Heritage Property Act states that if council adopts a conservation plan and bylaw, council must designate a Heritage Officer who will be responsible for the conservation plan and bylaw and the issuance of certificates of appropriateness. Heritage officers, also support the town's Heritage Advisory Committee and issue permits under the town's Heritage Property Bylaw. Just to give a little bit of background on Laura, Laura Legrelli, who is currently the town's Heritage Housing and Design Officer, has trained at Willow School of Restoration Arts and has worked on many conservation projects, including the Lunenburg Academy and Connaught Ruin House National Historic Sites. She has also worked on the Town of Banff's municipal heritage inventory, including administering heritage bylaws and policies. I'd also like to note that Hillary Grant, our interim CAO, will remain a heritage officer as well. Nothing prohibits council from appointing multiple heritage officers. So this is standard practice across the province. There are no financial implications because Laura's term position, that was the understanding upon her hiring, that these would be an additional responsibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there's a recommendation. There's someone prepared to move that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Moser, seconded by Councillor Halverson. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Laura, welcome to the team. So we'll move on to 13.2, land use bylaw amendment request. That was a notice that I presented back in July. So I need someone from council to make this motion because I'm not allowed to make motions. So is someone willing to make that motion? It's basically to make the Main Street area, which is Victoria Road in layman's terms, a more easier for development. Developers are hitting some roadblocks. We've had some requests and it's a little convoluted over there right now. So staff, I think, was okay with this recommendation. So it's basically trying to clean it up a bit so more types of development can go in that zoning area. So that's why it was made. But again, I can't make the motion. So moved by Councillor Bertels. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to know what are some of the impediments that they're finding? What are they coming up against that requires a change?
Well, I'll ask staff to explain it because it didn't make sense to me when it was explained to me, and then asking staff, they looked into it. I don't think it made sense to staff at times, but to have like a 3-story residential building, you need to build a 6-story building or something to that nature. It's bizarre. So if staff wants to explain it, I'm not sure how it got in there, to be honest, but if staff wants to explain it, they can go ahead. Is someone here prepared to explain it?
Through the chair. The Main Street form zone is limited to the Victoria Road area. And it was developed to encourage mixed use development. So the idea being that there would be a requirement for a 1.5-story commercial with the street facing wall being of a certain minimum length. So you have a length requirement and a height requirement on that first story, and then residential can be built above. This is, I believe, though I must admit, I would want to double check the land use bylaw, but this is an area of town. I know that it is an area of town where drive-throughs and gas stations are permitted. So for example, if someone did want to build a new gas station on Victoria Road, you would need to find a way to build a gas station that has a facade facing the road of 1.5-story heights with some space above it. So it has at times caused some difficulties. But again, of course, should this notice of motion pass, staff would only be directed to prepare a report with recommendations revising the land use bylaws Main Street form zone. So this is something that staff has not begun researching in any depth. I'm solely speaking from memory of being in the planning department.
If I remember correctly, again, this has been way back in the term now at this point, but that I remember that the intent for that, I do believe, was to create that retail residential corridor along there. But if we're talking about putting another gas station, well, that doesn't work. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense to have another look at it.
Yeah, I think that the reason it was brought to my attention was someone over there that currently has a housing facility wanted to upgrade to 3 stories. And in order to do that, they'd have to put a commercial on the bottom, which makes no sense where it's currently located, quite frankly. So, I mean, we're all about development and hoping to provide more housing. So I think I was asking staff to go back and review ways to come back with easier ways to be able to do that over there. If someone wants to put a 4-story apartment in building on that street, but doesn't want to put a 4.5 story of commercial on the main floor, I don't think we'd be totally opposed to it at this day and age, right? But right now, they're not even allowed to do that. So that's why I was looking for recommendations more so than anything, because part of it didn't make sense to a lot of people when they looked into it. So again, I think the vision of that street and what that street is now, the vision of some and what it actually is now might be totally different than what we actually have there, quite frankly. So someone, it's been moved and seconded. Is there ready to vote? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. So that's really it for the regular part of the meeting. A motion to move in cameras in order, and then we'll go on a recess. Motion by Counselor, motion to move in camera, second by Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much, folks, for attending tonight.